The day a god bowed to a human was the day Princess Alicia Voss realized everything she had been taught was a lie. The memory haunted her like a distant star that refused to fade. Even now, standing beneath the crystal arches of the Celestial Assembly Hall, she could still see it. The impossible moment, the silence, the disbelief, the fear. The hall around her shimmered with silver light reflected from 1,000 floating chandeliers suspended beneath a dome nearly half a mile wide. Representatives from hundreds of worlds filled the ascending tiers of seats, their colorful robes and ceremonial armor forming a living mosaic beneath the glow of distant constellations projected across the ceiling. The scent of polished metal and exotic flowers drifted through the cool air. Every eye in the galaxy seemed fixed upon the central platform. Alicia stood perfectly still beside the throne of her father, Emperor Alaric Voss. Her white ceremonial gown flowed around her feet like liquid moonlight. A crown of translucent crystal rested upon her silver-blonde hair. She looked every inch the future ruler of the Aurelian Dominion. Inside, however, she felt nothing but resignation. Today she would be married. Not for love, not for family, not even for herself. She would marry for peace. Beyond the towering windows, the orbital shipyards glowed against the darkness of space. Thousands of vessels surrounded the capital world. Human ships, a sight that would have been unthinkable only a decade earlier. For generations, the Dominion had viewed humanity as an unpredictable newcomer. A species that expanded too quickly, adapted too easily, refused to obey the rules that governed every civilized power in the galaxy. Yet here they were, allies, partners. The price of that alliance stood only a few yards away. Alicia's gaze settled on the man waiting at the far end of the platform. Ethan Carter, human ambassador, former fleet commander, her future husband. He looked nothing like the legends. No elaborate uniform. No collection of medals. No intimidating entourage. Just a tall man in a simple black formal jacket. His posture relaxed. His expression calm. Almost ordinary. That annoyed her more than she cared to admit. The galaxy spoke of humanity with equal parts admiration and caution. Stories filled entire archives. Humains survivant un possible désastre. Humans crossing worlds to rescue strangers. Humans standing against threats that sent older civilizations running. Yet Ethan Carter looked like a man who might spend a quiet afternoon reading beside a fireplace. Alicia found herself wondering if the stories had simply grown larger than reality. A low chime echoed through the chamber. The ceremony was about to begin. Her father rose from his throne. Conversations faded instantly. The immense hall fell silent. Before the emperor could speak, however, a sudden vibration rolled through the floor. Not violent, not dangerous, just powerful enough to command attention. The floating chandeliers trembled. The projected constellations flickered. A ripple of uncertainty spread through the audience. Alicia frowned. Then she saw it. A figure standing near the rear entrance of the hall. No guards had announced the arrival. No ships had appeared on any scanner. One moment the doorway had been empty. The next, someone stood there. Tall, cloaked in pale gold light. Ancient, calm. Every instinct in her body tightened. Around the chamber, representatives slowly rose from their seats. Some stared. Others lowered their eyes. A whisper moved through the crowd like a gust of wind through leaves. Not a name. A title. God. The visitor walked forward with measured steps. No one stopped him. No one dared. The air itself seemed apart before him. Alicia had heard stories of the Celestials since childhood. Beings older than empires. Older than recorded history. Most considered them myths. Yet the fear spreading through the chamber was undeniably real. The figure approached the central platform. His luminous eyes swept across the assembly before finally settling on Ethan Carter. Alicia expected confrontation, perhaps judgment. Instead, something happened that shattered every certainty she possessed. The ancient being stopped, lowered his head, and bowed, not to an emperor, not to a throne, not to a god, to a human. Ethan stood quietly beneath the silver light. His expression never changed. Across the hall, shock spread like wildfire. Alicia felt her pulse quicken. Her breath caught. One question echoed through her mind. What kind of species could make even gods bow their heads? The bow lasted only a few seconds, yet its impact lingered long after the ancient visitor straightened. The silence inside the celestial assembly hall felt heavier than stone. Thousands of delegates remained frozen in place, their expressions ranging from confusion to disbelief. Princess Alicia Voss could hear nothing except the faint hum of the energy conduits hidden beneath the polished floor and the steady rhythm of her own heartbeat. The Celestial regarded Ethan Carter for another moment. Then, without explanation, he turned away. Golden light gathered around his form like drifting sunlight through morning fog. A second later, the space he occupied stood empty. No flash, no sound, simply gone. Murmurs erupted across the chamber. Questions spread faster than wildfire. Some representatives immediately activated communication devices. Others stared toward the platform, as if expecting reality itself to correct the impossible event they had just witnessed. Alicia found herself looking only at Ethan. The human remained calm, almost annoyingly calm. He adjusted one sleeve of his black jacket and quietly resumed his place, as if celestial beings appeared at diplomatic ceremonies every day. Her father finally raised a hand. The hall slowly settled. The ceremony continued, though its dignity had been fractured beyond repair. Every guest present now carried the same question. Why had a being worshipped across entire sectors bowed to a human? Yet no answer came. The marriage proceeded under silver lights and artificial constellations. Ancient vows were exchanged. Documents were signed. Alliance seals were activated. Photographers captured historic images destined for archives throughout known space. Alicia performed every required step perfectly. Years of royal training ensured that. Her smile never faltered. Her posture remained flawless. Inside, however, curiosity had begun replacing resentment. By the time the final diplomatic anthem echoed through the hall, she had barely thought about the marriage itself. She could think only about the bow. Hours later, the celebrations continued across the capital. Fireworks painted the night sky beyond the palace windows. Massive transport lanes glowed with streams of civilian traffic. Citizens gathered in parks, plazas, and observation decks to witness history. The newly married couple, however, found themselves alone for the first time. Alicia stood on a private balcony overlooking the illuminated city. A cool breeze moved through her hair. The air smelled faintly of rain from weather control systems operating above the upper atmosphere. Behind her, glass doors slid open with a soft hiss. Ethan stepped outside, carrying 2 steaming cups. He offered one without speaking. Alicia accepted it cautiously. The aroma surprised her. Earth coffee. She recognized it from diplomatic receptions. Strong, bitter, surprisingly pleasant. For several moments, neither spoke. The city sparkled beneath them like a sea of stars. Finally, Alicia broke the silence. Did you know that being would appear today? Ethan took a sip from his cup. No. Then why were you not surprised? His gaze remained fixed on the horizon. Because surprises usually come when you think you understand everything. The answer irritated her immediately. That does not explain anything. A faint smile touched his face. It was not supposed to. Alicia narrowed her eyes. Human conversations, she was beginning to realize, often resembled puzzles. Everyone saw what happened. I know. A celestial bowed to you. He did. And you're acting as though that is perfectly normal. Ethan considered that. Normal is a flexible concept. She exhaled sharply. Do humans always answer questions by creating new ones? Only when the real answer is complicated. The city lights reflected in the glass railing between them. Somewhere far below, distant music drifted upward from the ongoing celebrations. Alicia studied him carefully. She had expected arrogance from someone receiving such attention. Pride, self-importance. Yet none appeared. If anything, Ethan looked slightly uncomfortable. You could tell me the truth, she said quietly. Perhaps. Will you? His expression softened. Not secretive, not evasive, just patient. Not tonight. For reasons she could not explain, that answer felt honest. Ethan looked back toward the city. Besides, he said, if I told you everything now, you would miss the interesting part. Alicia frowned. And what is the interesting part? The human ambassador watched a burst of blue fireworks bloom above the distant skyline, discovering why the story matters. For the first time since the ceremony, Alicia realized something unsettling. Ethan Carter was not hiding from her questions. He was waiting for her to ask the right ones. Morning arrived beneath a blanket of silver clouds drifting across the upper atmosphere of Aurelia Prime. From the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Eastern Palace Wing, Princess Alicia Voss watched sunlight spill across the capital city in waves of gold and white. Hundreds of air transports moved between towering spires. Energy bridges shimmered above gardens, suspended nearly 1,000 feet above the ground. Everything looked peaceful, ordered, predictable, the way a capital world was supposed to look. Unfortunately, her thoughts were anything but orderly. The previous day refused to leave her mind. The Celestial's bow. Et un carteres impossible calme. The strange certainty in his voice whenever he avoided answering a question. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. Her personal assistant appeared on a nearby display. Your schedule begins in 20 minutes, Your Highness. Alicia sighed. Of course it does. Diplomatic marriages came with obligations. Endless obligations. Ceremonies. Meetings. Public appearances. Official photographs. Hours later, she found herself moving through one of the palace's largest reception halls alongside Ethan and a procession of diplomats. Crystal chandeliers hung nearly 60 feet overhead. The polished floor reflected every light source like a mirror. Representatives from dozens of allied worlds gathered around display tables, showcasing cultural exhibits from both civilizations. Everything was proceeding exactly as protocol demanded. Then the power failed. Not completely, only partially. Several display systems flickered out. A section of overhead lighting dimmed. Security personnel immediately began checking diagnostic feeds. Event coordinators rushed toward control stations. Diplomats exchanged concerned looks. Nothing dangerous had happened. Nothing dramatic. Just a technical malfunction. Yet the reaction fascinated Alicia. Most of the delegates remained exactly where they were, waiting for someone else to solve the problem. Ethan did not. Before palace technicians could even arrive, the human quietly stepped away from the diplomatic group and walked toward a maintenance access panel built into a nearby wall. Curious, Alicia followed from a distance. The panel had already been opened by a nervous maintenance worker. Wires and diagnostic screens glowed inside the compartment. Power relay cascade? Ethan asked. The technician blinked. I think so, sir. Secondary converter overload? Possibly. Ethan studied the display for only a few seconds. Then he reached for a portable diagnostic tablet resting on the worker's cart. His fingers moved quickly across the controls. Your backup systems are fighting each other, he said. They are both trying to compensate for the same voltage fluctuation. The technician stared. How did you know that? Ethan pointed toward a series of blinking indicators. Because the warning lights are arguing. Alicia frowned. Warning lights could argue? The technician looked confused for a moment before suddenly laughing. That is exactly what they are doing. Several adjustments later, the overhead lights brightened. The display systems restarted. Conversations resumed throughout the hall. Crisis solved, if it could even be called a crisis. Ethan handed the tablet back and thanked the technician as though the man had done him a favor. Then he returned to the diplomatic gathering. Nothing more. No speech. No announcement. No attempt to attract attention. Alicia followed him through the crowd. You are a fleet commander, she said. Former fleet commander, he corrected. Then why do you know how to repair electrical systems? Because they break. That is not an answer. It is a very human answer. She folded her arms. Do all humans learn engineering? Ethan smiled slightly. No, but most humans eventually learn that understanding how things work is useful. Even rulers? Especially rulers. They continued walking past exhibits and holographic displays. Alicia noticed something else. Staff members greeted Ethan. Security officers greeted Ethan. Custodians greeted Ethan. Every time, he stopped and answered them. Not as an ambassador speaking to employees. As one person speaking to another. Equal. Respectful. Genuine. It was unusual enough that she found herself watching it repeatedly. Late that afternoon, while returning through one of the palace gardens, Alicia finally voiced the thought forming in her mind. You spend a great deal of time talking to people most leaders ignore. Ethan glanced toward a gardener trimming a row of luminous white flowers. Those people keep everything running. You mean the palace, the city, the fleet, society. Alicia looked away. In all her years of royal education, very few instructors had ever described civilization that way. Ethan stopped beside a fountain where sunlight reflected across moving water. You can learn a lot about a civilization, he said quietly, by watching how it treats the people nobody notices. The fountain continued its gentle rhythm. Water rose. Water fell. Around them, the garden remained peaceful. Yet for reasons she could not fully explain, Alicia felt as though she had just learned something far more important than anything discussed during the entire diplomatic summit. 3 days later, rain drifted across Aurelia Prime in thin silver sheets. From the upper observation deck of the Royal Transit Complex, Princess Alicia Voss watched thousands of travelers move through the enormous terminal below. Cargo crews guided floating containers across illuminated pathways. Families hurried toward departure gates. Merchants negotiated shipments from distant systems. The constant hum of engines and announcement systems blended into a rhythm that felt strangely alive. The visit had been scheduled as a simple diplomatic appearance. Human and Aurelian representatives would tour the facility, greet workers, and reinforce the image of a successful alliance. Nothing extraordinary was supposed to happen. At least that was the plan. Alicia walked beside Ethan Carter through one of the elevated corridors overlooking the main concourse. Reporters followed at a respectful distance. Security officers monitored every entrance. Everything remained orderly until a sharp warning tone echoed through the terminal. Several overhead displays flickered. A transportation lane near the eastern loading zone abruptly shut down. Within seconds, hundreds of travelers stopped moving. Confused conversations spread throughout the facility. Alicia turned toward a nearby operation screen. What happened? One of the supervisors touched a communicator against his ear. Temporary guidance failure in the cargo routing network. Nothing dangerous. We are already working on it. The explanation seemed sufficient. Technical disruptions occurred occasionally in facilities of this size. Repair teams would resolve the issue. Schedules would resume. The diplomatic delegation could continue its tour. Yet Ethan was already moving, not toward the executive offices, not toward the control center, toward the loading zone where the disruption had occurred. Alicia followed with growing curiosity. When they arrived, dozens of workers were attempting to redirect shipments manually. Several elderly travelers sat waiting near inactive transport platforms. Parents struggled to keep children occupied while delays accumulated. Nobody appeared distressed, only inconvenienced. Ethan immediately walked toward a young maintenance employee studying a malfunction report. "Need another set of hands?" he asked. The worker looked up in surprise. "Sir, you look busy." "I'm extremely busy." "Then that sounds like a yes." For the next 20 minutes, Ethan helped organize passengers, moved equipment carts, answered questions, and carried supply cases that had been abandoned during the routing failure. No cameras followed him. No official announcements acknowledged him. Most people did not even recognize who he was. Alicia watched from several yards away. The behavior made no sense. He was a diplomatic ambassador, a military commander, one of the most influential humans in the alliance. Yet he acted as though helping strangers navigate a delayed transit lane was the most natural responsibility in the world. Eventually, an elderly woman approached carrying 2 travel bags that appeared heavier than she could comfortably manage. Before Alicia could summon assistance, Ethan was already there. He carried the bags to her gate and returned a few minutes later without mentioning it to anyone. "You keep doing that," Alicia said once they were alone again. Ethan glanced toward her. Doing what? Helping people who cannot offer you anything in return. A faint smile appeared. Most of the important things people give you are not things. Alicia considered that answer. You realize none of this advances your political position. Probably not. It does not improve negotiations. Probably not. It does not increase your influence. Definitely not. She folded her arms. Then why? Ethan stopped beside a massive observation window overlooking the rain-covered landing fields. Cargo ships rested beneath shimmering energy shields. Ground crews moved through the mist below. For several moments, he simply watched them work. Because civilization is not measured by how leaders are treated, he said quietly. It is measured by how ordinary people experience an ordinary day. Alicia followed his gaze. Workers loading freight. Families preparing for journeys. Technicians repairing systems most travelers would never notice. The people who kept entire worlds functioning. Humans actually believe that? She asked. The good ones try to. A repair alert suddenly disappeared from a nearby screen. The cargo network had been restored. Travelers began moving again. Delays dissolved. Life continued. Around them, nobody applauded. Nobody celebrated. Most would never know who had spent the last half hour helping behind the scenes. Ethan seemed perfectly content with that. As the terminal returned to normal, Alicia found herself remembering the Celestials' bow once again. For the first time, she began to suspect that whatever secret surrounded humanity had nothing to do with power at all. The rain had ended by evening, leaving the palace gardens washed clean beneath a sky filled with drifting stars. Soft lights glowed along winding stone pathways. Water shimmered across polished leaves. The scent of night-blooming flowers drifted through the cool air. Princess Alicia Voss walked alone through the gardens, grateful for a rare moment without advisors, diplomats, or ceremony. The events of the past week continued to circle through her thoughts. The Celestials' bow. Ethan's refusal to seek recognition. His habit of noticing people others overlooked. None of it fit the image she had been taught to expect from powerful individuals. A quiet sound drew her attention. Laughter. She followed it toward one of the lower terraces overlooking a reflecting pool nearly 200 feet long. There she found Ethan seated on the edge of a stone planter, surrounded by several children from visiting diplomatic families. One child held a small model spacecraft. Another carried a tablet displaying a puzzle game. Ethan appeared completely absorbed in a discussion about navigation systems and asteroid mining routes. Alicia stopped beneath a nearby archway and watched unnoticed. One little boy asked a question. Ethan listened seriously before answering. A young girl interrupted with a different question. He listened to her too, not politely, not out of obligation, genuinely. The conversation continued for nearly 30 minutes. Eventually, parents arrived to collect their children. As they departed, every child seemed reluctant to leave. One even turned back to wave. Ethan waved back. Then the terrace grew quiet again. You are difficult to understand, Alicia said as she stepped from the shadows. Ethan glanced up. I have heard that before. Most leaders spend their time trying to impress influential people. That sounds exhausting. You were discussing asteroid mining routes with an 8-year-old. Actually, she was explaining asteroid mining routes to me. Alicia fought the urge to smile. And was her explanation accurate? Surprisingly accurate. Ethan stood and brushed a few leaves from his jacket. Together, they began walking along the illuminated path surrounding the reflecting pool. The water mirrored the stars so perfectly that it looked like a second sky beneath their feet. For several minutes, neither spoke. The silence felt comfortable rather than awkward. That realization surprised Alicia almost as much as the silence itself. Can I ask you something? She finally said. You usually do. Why do humans care so much about individuals? Ethan looked toward the water. What do you mean? Your species seems unusually focused on single lives. Single choices. Single people. He thought about that for a moment. Because every large thing is made from small things. That sounds overly simple. Most important truths are. They continued walking. A light breeze rippled across the pool. Reflections stretched and shifted beneath the stars. When humans look at a crowd, Ethan said quietly, we try to remember that every person in it is living a story we cannot see. Alicia considered those words. Even strangers? Especially strangers. Why? Ethan smiled faintly. Because kindness is easiest when it is deserved. The real test is showing it when nothing requires you to. The answer lingered in her mind long after he finished speaking. Ahead, near the far end of the garden, an elderly groundskeeper was struggling to reposition a maintenance cart that had become stuck between two decorative stone borders. Without hesitation, Ethan changed direction and walked over. The man immediately protested that he could manage. Ethan ignored the protest with a friendly smile and helped free the cart. The entire task took less than a minute. Then they continued their walk as if nothing significant had happened. Yet Alicia found herself staring at the path behind them. A future ruler spent years learning strategy, economics, diplomacy, military doctrine. Entire libraries existed to explain how civilizations became powerful. Yet no instructor had ever suggested that greatness might begin with something as small as helping someone whose name would never appear in history. As they reached the edge of the reflecting pool, Ethan stopped and looked upward. Thousands of stars filled the darkness above. Beautiful night, he said. Alicia followed his gaze. For the first time since their marriage, she realized she was no longer trying to understand humanity. She was beginning to admire it. 2 nights later, sleep refused to come. Princess Alicia Voss stood alone inside one of the oldest wings of the royal palace, surrounded by silence and shadows. Most of the modern sections glowed with elegant lighting and polished architecture, but this place belonged to another age. Stone walls rose nearly 40 feet overhead. Ancient banners hung motionless in the darkness. Rows of archival chambers stretched deep beneath the palace foundations. Few people visited them anymore. That was precisely why she had come. The questions she carried had only grown heavier. Every day revealed another contradiction. Humanity possessed enormous influence, yet Ethan never seemed interested in power. Humanity commanded vast fleets, yet he spoke more often about ordinary citizens than military victories. And then there was the bow, the impossible bow. Alicia moved deeper into the archive complex. Motion sensors activated soft lights along the corridor ahead. Dust drifted through narrow beams of illumination. The air smelled faintly of aged paper and preserved data crystals. At the end of the hall stood a secured historical repository reserved for members of the imperial family. She placed her hand against the biometric scanner. A soft tone sounded. The door opened. Inside, towering shelves contained records dating back thousands of years. Holographic interfaces floated above long tables. Entire centuries of history waited in silence. Alicia activated a search terminal and entered a single phrase: Celestials and Humanity. Thousands of results appeared instantly. Most were diplomatic references, academic theories, religious interpretations. Nothing unusual. Then she noticed something strange. Several records carried access restrictions far beyond normal classification levels. Restricted not by military authorities, not by intelligence agencies, by multiple civilizations simultaneously. Her curiosity sharpened immediately. She opened the oldest file she could access. The document was incomplete. Large portions had been removed. Entire pages were missing. Yet enough remained to reveal something unexpected. The text described an age nearly 2,000 years earlier, a period when many younger civilizations viewed the Celestials with absolute reverence. Their words shaped laws. Their guidance influenced empires. Their approval determined the fate of worlds. Alicia continued reading. The further she went, the stranger the records became. Humanity appeared repeatedly, not as conquerors, not as rebels, not even as rivals. Instead, ancient observers described humans as unpredictable, difficult to control, resistant to authority that could not justify itself. One surviving passage caught her attention. She read it twice to ensure she understood correctly. Humanity does not reject power. Humanity rejects power without purpose. Alicia frowned. That did not sound like a military assessment. It sounded philosophical. Another damage file referenced negotiations between human representatives and several celestial envoys centuries earlier. Most details have been erased. One sentence remained intact. The meeting concluded unsuccessfully because humanity refused to surrender independent moral judgment. Alicia stared at the words. Independent moral judgment. The phrase felt strangely familiar. It sounded exactly like Ethan. A voice suddenly broke the silence behind her. You are looking in dangerous places. She turned sharply. Ethan stood near the entrance to the archive chamber. His hands rested casually in his pockets. His expression remained calm. How long have you been standing there? She asked. Long enough to know you skipped dinner. Alicia sighed. That is not an answer. It rarely is. Despite herself, she almost smiled. Did you know these records exist? Yes. Did you know parts were hidden? Also yes. She looked back toward the glowing display. Why? Ethan walked slowly toward the table. The soft archive lights reflected across the polished surface. Because history makes people uncomfortable. History always makes people uncomfortable. Exactly. For several moments, neither spoke. Finally, Alicia gestured toward the files. These records describe humans differently than anything I learned growing up. Ethan nodded. Most civilizations measure greatness by influence. And humans do not. Not usually. Then how do humans measure it? Ethan looked at one of the ancient texts projected above the table. By what someone is willing to protect, when protecting it becomes inconvenient. The words settled into the silence around them. Alicia glanced back toward the hidden records. For the first time, she began to suspect that the greatest secret in galactic history was not what humanity had done. It was what humanity had refused to become. The following morning, the sky above Aurelia Prime carried an unusual stillness. The endless streams of orbital traffic that normally crossed the heavens seemed thinner, quieter. Even the palace felt different. Servants spoke in softer voices. Advisors moved through corridors with restrained urgency. Something was changing. Princess Alicia Voss sensed it long before anyone explained why. She stood inside a conference chamber overlooking the capital when a priority transmission arrived from the outer sectors. The holographic display activated above the center table. Star maps unfolded in pale blue light. Dozens of systems appeared across the projection. Several glowed with warning indicators. Not emergency signals. Observation alerts. Alicia exchanged a glance with her father. Emperor Alaric Voss rarely showed concern publicly, yet she noticed the subtle tension in his posture. Across the table, Ethan Carter remained calm as always. That calm was becoming increasingly unsettling. One of the senior intelligence directors stepped forward. 3 celestial envoys have appeared within Alliance territory during the past 48 hours. The room immediately grew silent. Alicia felt a chill despite the comfortable temperature. Celestials rarely appeared at all. Multiple appearances within days was almost unheard of. Have they issued any statements? Her father asked. No, Your Majesty. Requests? None. Threats? None. The director hesitated. They have simply been observing. That answer somehow felt worse. Alicia looked toward Ethan. He was studying the star map carefully. Not surprised. Not alarmed. Thoughtful. As though he had expected this development. Hours later, after the meeting concluded, she found him standing alone on one of the palace observation terraces. Wind moved through the elevated gardens surrounding the platform. Thousands of feet below, the city stretched across the horizon like a sea of light. You knew something like this would happen, she said. Ethan did not deny it. I suspected. Because of the archives? Partly. Alicia stepped beside him. Everyone seems nervous. That is understandable. You are not nervous. Ethan smiled faintly. I learned a long time ago that uncertainty and danger are not always the same thing. The answer sounded reasonable, yet it did not satisfy her. Nothing seemed to satisfy her anymore. Every answer only created larger questions. Tell me something honestly, she said. Have humans always had a connection with the Celestials? Ethan remained silent for several seconds. The breeze carried the scent of distant rain across the terrace. Finally, he nodded. Yes. Were they allies? Sometimes. Enemies? Sometimes. What were they then? Ethan looked toward the horizon where the first stars were becoming visible against the fading daylight. Teachers, critics, observers, occasionally friends. Alicia stared at him. That sounds impossible. Most long relationships are complicated. She almost laughed despite herself. Somehow humanity had apparently developed a history with godlike beings that sounded remarkably similar to a difficult family relationship. Then why are so many records hidden? She asked. Ethan's expression grew more serious. Because history often gets simplified. Simplified how? People prefer stories about power. And the truth. Ethan watched the first evening lights appear across the city below. The truth is usually about choices. The words lingered between them. Alicia remembered the old archive records. Humanity refusing to surrender independent judgment. Humanity questioning authority. Humanity protecting principles even when doing so carried a cost. Suddenly, another realization surfaced. The Celestials never tried to destroy humanity, did they? Ethan glanced toward her. No. Then why do so many civilizations act as if humans defeated them? For the first time, Ethan looked genuinely impressed. That is a very good question. And a small smile appeared. You are finally asking the right ones. Before she could press further, a notification chimed from his communicator. Ethan read the message. The smile vanished. Not from fear, from focus. What is it? Alicia asked. He turned the display toward her. A single line appeared on the screen. Official request for audience. Origin, Celestial Council. Alicia felt her pulse quicken. The message carried no threats. No demands. Yet the significance was undeniable. Across thousands of years of recorded history, entire empires had waited centuries for such a summons. Ethan simply read the notice and slipped the communicator back into his pocket. Well, he said quietly, it seems they are ready to talk. As darkness settled over the capital, Alicia found herself staring at the stars once more. Somewhere beyond them waited answers hidden for generations. And for the first time, she suspected the truth would change far more than her understanding of humanity. It might change her understanding of the galaxy itself. The journey to the Celestial Council began before dawn. A single diplomatic vessel departed Aurelia Prime beneath a sky still wrapped in darkness. No escort fleet accompanied them. No ceremonial procession followed behind. The invitation had specified only 3 attendees. Ethan Carter, Princess Alicia Voss, Emperor Alaric Voss. Nothing more. Hours later, the stars outside the observation deck shifted as the vessel entered a region absent from every public star chart. The navigation systems could not identify it. Long-range sensors returned incomplete readings. It was as if the surrounding space existed slightly outside normal reality. Alicia stood beside the panoramic viewport, watching distant bands of silver light ripple across the void. They resembled oceans suspended among the stars. Beautiful, unsettling, ancient. The vessel eventually emerged near a structure unlike anything she had ever seen. At first she thought it was a planet. Then she realized it was far too symmetrical. A colossal ring of luminous white stone floated in space, spanning hundreds of miles from end to end. Towers rose from its surface like crystal mountains. Rivers of light flowed between them. Entire civilizations could have lived within its boundaries. Yet the structure remained silent, timeless, waiting. The council's citadel, Ethan said quietly. Alicia could not hide her amazement. How old is it? Nobody knows. Not even humans. Ethan smiled. Especially not humans. Their vessel passed through a glowing aperture and entered a vast interior chamber. The docking process completed without instructions. The station seemed to know exactly where they were supposed to go. Minutes later, they found themselves walking through corridors illuminated by a soft golden light. No guard stood watch. No servants hurried through the halls. The silence felt intentional, like a cathedral built for contemplation rather than authority. Eventually, they reached a circular chamber nearly half a mile wide. 12 elevated platforms surrounded its perimeter. Upon each stood a celestial. Some appeared human, others did not. Their forms differed dramatically, yet they all shared the same unmistakable presence. The sensation of standing near something impossibly old. Alicia felt her pulse quicken. Beside her, Ethan remained calm. One of the Celestials stepped forward. It was the same being who had bowed during the wedding ceremony. "Welcome," the ancient figure said. The voice carried no amplification, yet it filled the chamber effortlessly. "We are honored by your arrival." Alicia noticed something immediately. The statement had been directed toward Ethan. Not the Emperor, not the royal family. Ethan inclined his head politely. "You requested a meeting." "We did." The Celestial's luminous gaze shifted toward Alicia. "And we believe she deserves answers." The words echoed through the chamber. Alicia suddenly realized every member of the council was looking at her. Not with judgment, not with hostility, with curiosity. Another Celestial spoke. "For many centuries, younger civilizations have misunderstood our relationship with humanity." A third continued. "Some believe humanity defeated us. Others believe we fear them. Both conclusions are incomplete." Alicia glanced toward Ethan. He remained silent, allowing them to speak. "Then what is the truth?" she asked. The chamber grew still. The first Celestial answered. "Humanity possesses no power we cannot comprehend." That surprised her. "Then why the secrecy?" The ancient being smiled gently. "Because what makes humanity extraordinary is not power." Another Celestial stepped forward. Every advanced civilization eventually faces the same temptation. To place efficiency above compassion, order above conscience, stability above freedom. Their voices blended together like parts of a single conversation unfolding across centuries. Alicia listened carefully. "Most civilizations accept those compromises," one said. "Humanity rarely does," said another. "Even when doing so would be easier." The realization arrived slowly. The hidden records, Ethan's actions, the stories, the patterns, they all pointed toward the same truth. Humanity's greatest strength was not technology, not military capability, not influence. It was the stubborn refusal to abandon certain principles, no matter how inconvenient they became. The first Celestial looked directly at her. "We do not fear humanity because they are powerful." The chamber fell completely silent. "We respect humanity because they continually choose what power is meant to protect." Alicia felt something shift inside her. For weeks, she had searched for some hidden secret buried beneath history. Now she understood. The secret had never been hidden. It had simply been difficult to believe. And as she looked toward Ethan, standing quietly beneath the golden light, she finally understood why even beings older than civilizations treated certain humans with such profound respect. The return journey felt different. The stars outside the diplomatic vessel no longer seemed distant to Princess Alicia Voss. They felt connected. Every world, every civilization, every choice. She stood alone near the observation deck as Aurelia Prime slowly grew larger ahead of them. The blue-white glow of the capital world reflected across the glass. Behind her, quiet footsteps approached. She did not need to turn around to know who it was. Ethan Carter stopped beside her. For a while, neither spoke. The silence carried none of the uncertainty that had existed between them only weeks earlier. It felt comfortable now. "Familiar. You knew I would eventually find the answer," Alicia said softly. Ethan folded his hands behind his back. "I hoped you would. You could have told me." "I could have. Why did you not?" He looked toward the planet below. "Because some truths become smaller when someone hands them to you." Alicia smiled faintly. That sounded exactly like him. The vessel entered orbit. Thousands of lights appeared across the night side of the world. Cities sparkled beneath scattered cloud formations. Traffic lanes glowed like rivers of gold stretching across continents. "Home," Yet home no longer looked exactly the same. Neither did the galaxy. Several days later, a formal reception was held inside the Grand Hall of the Imperial Palace. Representatives from dozens of allied systems gathered beneath the enormous crystal dome. News of the council meeting had spread rapidly. Rumors filled every corner of the known galaxy. Everyone wanted answers. Everyone wanted explanations. The hall buzzed with anticipation. Alicia stood beside her father and Ethan as guests arrived. For the first time since the wedding, she noticed something she would have previously overlooked. Servants moved quietly through the room, ensuring every guest felt welcome. Security personnel remained alert near entrances. Technicians monitored environmental systems from hidden control stations. Hundreds of ordinary people made the event possible. Ethan greeted many of them by name. She found herself doing the same. The realization brought an unexpected smile. Perhaps some lessons spread more easily than others. As the evening continued, one final guest arrived. The atmosphere shifted immediately. Conversations softened. Attention turned toward the entrance. A familiar figure walked into the hall, surrounded by a faint golden glow. The same celestial who had appeared during the wedding ceremony. Once again, silence spread through the chamber. Hundreds of eyes followed the ancient being. Alicia watched carefully. This time she understood what everyone else did not. The celestial approached Ethan. For a brief moment, the entire hall seemed to hold its breath. Then the ancient figure inclined his head. Not dramatically, not ceremonially, simply a gesture of genuine respect. Ethan returned the gesture. Equal, neither above the other, neither below. The sight affected Alicia differently now. Weeks earlier it had seemed impossible. Now it felt perfectly natural. The celestial's gaze shifted toward her. "You understand," the ancient being said. It was not a question. Alicia nodded. "I think I do." The celestial smiled. "Then you understand something many civilizations never learn." A few moments later the gathering resumed. Music returned. Conversations continued. Life moved forward. Yet Alicia remained standing near the edge of the hall, watching people rather than dignitaries. A server helping an elderly delegate carry refreshments. A maintenance worker adjusting a lighting panel. A child laughing while chasing reflections across the polished floor. Small moments. Ordinary moments. Human moments. Ethan eventually joined her near one of the towering windows overlooking the city. The stars reflected across the glass behind them. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. Alicia looked out at the lights stretching toward the horizon. The answer, and she turned toward him. The galaxy was looking for something extraordinary. Ethan waited, but the answer was never extraordinary. A warm smile touched his face. No. Alicia glanced once more toward the people filling the hall. It was kindness, responsibility, conscience, the choice to care. Beyond the palace, countless stars shined across the darkness. Ancient, endless, silent. And for the first time in her life, Princess Alicia Voss understood why beings older than empires respected humanity so deeply. Not because humans were the strongest species in the galaxy. Not because they were the most advanced. But because when given power, they continued trying to remember why power existed in the first place. And somehow, in a universe fascinated by greatness, that simple act remained the rarest thing of all.